Hi, I'm Scott the Miniature Maniac, and welcome to yet another installment of Making Sexy Tiny Bases. I'm excited to get started, just like I'm excited to tell you about today's sponsor, Squarespace. From websites and online stores to marketing tools and analytics, Squarespace is the all-in-one platform to build a beautiful online presence and run your business. Okay, enough shilling. Let's start with our first base. I've been rewatching Stranger Things and was inspired. The Upside Down is a very dark place, and I don't necessarily have the tufts to match it, but one thing I tend to forget is that you can paint tufts. With a bit of dirt sealed onto the base, I begin to add a nice variety of vegetation. We're mimicking the woods of a Midwestern state, which basically looks like the forests in many other places of the world when you scale it down to super tiny. Well, there goes an attempt to make the Midwest sound like it's special in any way at all. I used tufts of various heights, some sticks from the outside, and dried out sea foam. With all my plant life in place, I paint the whole base black. Painting static grass, tufts, and other basing elements is a great idea to get extra mileage out of your basing material. Then from one side, I airbrush a cold, light blue, trying to imitate the moon. If you don't have an airbrush, consider sealing all the basic material with isopropyl alcohol and some scenic glue. The alcohol helps the glue evenly disperse, and I'll have a recipe for a scenic glue linked in the description below. With that done and sufficiently dry, you can do some gentle dry brushing of the moonlight color. With our color down, it's time to add some filth. With Oohoo glue, I apply some stretchy goo in between all the nice branches we added earlier. This choice is inspired by all the rot you see caused by the corruption of the Upside Down. Lastly, I added a very small amount of AK Interactive's snow material, which is identical to light molding paste if you prefer to buy it elsewhere for cheaper, likely. This inclusion was inspired by all the particles you see floating around when in the Upside Down. Finally, with a Q-tip soaked in isopropyl alcohol, I clean off the base rim to reveal a nice, clean, glossy rim. And that's the Upside Down complete. Now I just need a Steve Harrington mini. Alright, if you don't like seeing airbrushes used in internet tutorials, maybe skip to the next base because this base is going to make you flame me in the comments section. We're going to sand the top of the base nice and smooth for a very eerie, out of the norm feel. Then, with a series of grays, light blues, and greens, I'm going to draw attention to the center of the base by highlighting there and darkening around the edges. This is actually great practice for blending with an airbrush that's a little lower stress than on a miniature, should you need that. Then, with some masking tape and the paint I applied sufficiently cured, I applied a little disc of tape to the base to reveal the very outside edge that I paint with white. With my white ring complete, I began plotting out the points of the star. Doing this mathematically perfect requires a lot of plotting and drawing, which I can't really do on my base at this point, so I'm kind of just winging it. With the points of my star selected, next I'm simply masking and painting a bunch of lines that are hopefully the same thickness. To get nice clean lines, need to apply the paint slowly, trying to not flood the area with paint. Some good Tamiya masking tape is also helpful. Pulling off the last tape reveals our cute little star design, ready for our My Little Pony miniatures.
Just kidding, it's a pentagram, yeah, demons and stuff.
Sorry, nice Christian moms. To make sure no Sunday school teacher forgets that this base is from hell, I'm going to airbrush some fluorescent red ink on the white so we get a nice, juicy red. I'll admit, doing this step kind of erased 85% of the work I did in the beginning, so maybe if you plan on doing this, be more careful with the red ink, or just don't do the beginning work. With that done, we can clean off the base rim, same as before, and now we have a cool demon base fit for Doom Guy, a Bloodletter, or any other hellish beings. Before moving on to the next base, let's hear a brief word from our sponsor, Squarespace. I don't have a personal gallery for my miniature painting art, so when Squarespace reached out to me to sponsor a video, I took this as an opportunity to use their platform to build a dedicated gallery for myself. A gallery like this is useful for a number of reasons. For those who don't know what miniature painting is, I'm looking at you, Aunt Amy. This shows them in a succinct, beautiful way. Importing images and dealing with alignment is made easy, and all the while creating a website that just looks awesome. It's important that your galleries show your work while also being functional and beautiful itself. If I need to see a bigger resolution of this miniature so I can see the creamy blends, it's as simple as double clicking. If you want to save some fat stacks on making a miniature art gallery for yourself, head to squarespace.com/Miniac to save 10% off of your first purchase of a website or domain using the code Miniac at checkout. All right, back to the base making. With this cavalry base, I'm exploring the Tundra biome when it's not super snowy and cold, but during a warmer season. When looking at pictures, I saw lots of warm tones with cold horizons, so I wanted to emulate that. I placed a variety of dirt and rocks on my base and sealed it in with super glue thin. Then, with a rusty brown red, I base coated the dirt and dry brushed it with a desaturated blue color, beginning to work with a combination of both warm and cold hues. Then I superglued on a bunch of tufts that one might find in a tundra. Deadish grasses of various sizes and heights. I even added some orange flowers for a small pop of warm color. Lastly, I added some more of the AK Interactive snow to this base as well. Again, it's just light molding paste. This product is nice because it's water soluble, which means that you can taper the edges of the snow with water to blend it into the terrain a little bit better. Clean the rim of the base like you do when you miss the toilet, and job's a good one. Probably the most normal base I've ever made in this basing series. All right, on to the last base. The vibe I'm going for here is Sci-fi Pacific Northwest. Wet, murky future. Maybe it's the hull of a submarine, maybe it's a large outdoor facility in the forest. I don't know. First things first, we'll cut a little bit of diamond plate to act as a veneer for our base. To get a nice flat connection, I'll clamp it down with a big thick piece of styrene on top to apply even pressure, and then apply some glue to the edges. With that adhered nicely, I'll use a template to chart out a square that I'll cut out with an X-Acto knife and a straight edge. Take some time here to make sure you don't overcut the corners too much. I cut all the way through the base, but you don't have to do that if you don't want to. Then, with the hole cut, I trimmed out not only the hole on the base, but also the styrene I cut off. I'm intentionally oversizing these pieces so I can cut them to size later. I'm also using plenty of plastic glue so that all the styrene gets nice and melty so there are minimal gaps. With everything nice and dry, I sanded all the trim pieces to true them up and began to add some extra details. First, I took some tiny rivets linked below and glued them to the corners. Then I drilled 2 holes with my X-Acto knife in the lid of the hatch and bent a piece of aluminum to fit into the holes to act as a little handle. Then, with a few pieces of cylindrical styrene to act as a hinge, I glued the hatch onto the base, and now all of that work that I put into the lid of the hatch is invisible. Go me. With the fabrication of the base complete, it's now time to paint. I started with the green base coat. You might notice that I didn't prime the plastic, and that's because I'm lazy and this base isn't ever going to see any action. Feel free to prime yours for better paint adhesion. With the green done, I took a sponge and some silver paint and created the impression of chipping paint on the edges of various details. The raised portions of the diamond plate catch these silver chips pretty well. I then applied a layer of streaking grime as a wash, and when it had dried to the touch, I wiped away some of it with a sponge and some mineral spirits. This gives the details some definition, but also makes the base look a bit more grimy. Then, once the enamel wash had fully cured, I applied little spots of rust to select areas on the base, introducing a nice pop of color, but also some more of that damp environment vibe I'm going for. I intentionally used a brand that has a very matte finish because rust is often very matte. In this case, I used Chimera paints. You could also use dry pigments here if you were so inclined, applied with a bit of water. Lastly, I applied some puddles of water with Mod Podge Dimensional Magic, like rainfall had occurred recently and it hadn't fully evaporated yet. I like the contrast between the matte areas of rust and the glossy water puddles. I then painted the base rim black, and I did that instead of using isopropyl and a Q-tip because I was concerned that I'd reveal the tan styrene material on the edge if I was careless with my Q-tip, and I have been known to be. That's it. 4 bases done and dusted and added to the collection. If you like this series and would like more inspiration for bases, check out my other videos in this series. I'll have them linked below and in the corner of the video right now. I realize that a lot of these bases that I've made include steps that seem silly, or even the final result is unusable, and while that may be true for a large portion of the models that you encounter, the purpose of these videos is to simply strike creativity. Maybe one step of one base made you go, okay. And if it did, that's a win for me. I've never copied a procedure for anything step by step. My whole process is a patchwork quilt that I have stitched together from experience and watching others. Hopefully a few things I've shown today can be added to your blanket. All right, enough with the needlework analogies. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up, and if you like the channel and want to support it, there are a number of ways that you can do it, namely a Patreon campaign with a bunch of fun rewards, like a Discord server where you and I can chat about your miniature painting projects any day of the week, or about other unusable ideas for bases that I could make. You can also buy my miniature, the Duchess, and also a digital course that I made alongside it to teach you how I painted the box art for the miniature. And you can also buy a lot of the materials that I used on today's bases in the description below. And all those links are affiliate links, so when you buy using them, I get a little kickback at no extra cost to you. Subscribe or die! And most importantly, don't forget to paint my